A New York City councilman just stood on the floor and said what every working person has been thinking for a decade, and the real estate lobby is losing their minds. Zohran Mamdani didn't mince words. He called out the developers, the landlords, and the political class that's been protecting them while families get priced out of their own neighborhoods. This isn't just about housing policy. This is about who controls your city, who profits from your struggle, and why the people writing the laws keep getting richer while you can't afford rent. The backlash was immediate. The industry went into damage control. But here's what they don't want you to see. Mamdani exposed a system so deeply corrupt that even mentioning it out loud is considered radical. So let's talk about what he said, why it terrified the establishment, and what it reveals about the housing crisis that's swallowing America whole. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, City Council chambers in New York. The kind of session most people never watch because it's usually filled with procedural nonsense and carefully scripted talking points. But this time, something different cut through the noise. Zohran Mamdani stood up, and he didn't read from the approved script. He was there to discuss a housing development proposal, another luxury tower going up in a neighborhood where families are already being priced out. Standard stuff. The developers had their lobbyists in the room. The usual coalition of yes votes was lined up. This was supposed to be a formality. But Mamdani didn't play along. He looked directly at the developers in the gallery and said what most politicians won't, that the entire system is designed to enrich a small class of land speculators while working people get systematically pushed out of their own cities. He didn't use euphemisms. He didn't hide behind policy jargon. He called it what it is: corruption, a rigged game, a transfer of wealth from renters to landlords facilitated by the very people elected to represent the public. And the room got quiet. Not the good kind of quiet, the uncomfortable kind. The kind where people who are used to controlling the conversation suddenly realize they're not controlling it anymore. Some council members shifted in their seats. A few developers in the back crossed their arms. The usual political theater. The nodding, the polite disagreement, the I respect my colleague, but it all evaporated. Because Mamdani wasn't asking for their respect. He was telling them the truth, and the truth made them nervous. Here's why this matters. Politicians almost never do this. They talk about affordability challenges and housing supply issues like these are natural phenomena, like the weather. But Mamdani named the culprits. He pointed at the donor class, the real estate lobby, the revolving door between City Hall and private development firms. He made it personal. And he could do it because, and this is critical, he doesn't take their money. Zohran Mamdani is a Democratic socialist representing Queens. He's not a career politician. He didn't climb the ranks by kissing the ring of real estate developers or laying nice with the donor circuit. His campaigns are funded by small donations and grassroots organizing, which means when he stands up and calls out the system, there's no leash around his neck, no quiet phone call from a bundler telling him to tone it down, no fear that his next election depends on staying in line. That makes him dangerous. Not to you, not to the family getting evicted or the teacher commuting 2 hours because they can't afford to live near their school. Dangerous to the people who've spent decades building a political infrastructure that protects their profits while dressing it up as economic development. And the backlash? It came fast. But before we get to how the real estate lobby tried to bury him, we need to understand how this system was built in the first place. Because what Mamdani exposed isn't new. It's been happening for 40 years, right under our noses. And it didn't happen by accident. So how did we get here? How did we arrive at a place where a city councilman speaking plainly about housing corruption is considered radical? Because somewhere along the way, we stopped treating housing as shelter and started treating it as an investment vehicle. And that shift didn't happen overnight. It was deliberate. It was policy-driven. And it made a lot of people at the top extraordinarily wealthy while gutting the middle class. Let's rewind. For most of the 20th century, housing in America was understood as something you needed to live, a basic necessity, like food or water. Sure, people built equity. Sure, home ownership was part of the American dream. But housing prices tracked relatively close to wage growth. A middle-class family could buy a home on a single income. Rent was affordable because the market wasn't designed to extract maximum profit from every square foot. Then something changed. Starting in the 1980s, we began deregulating the housing market. Zoning laws that once prioritized communities and mixed-income neighborhoods were rewritten to protect property values for existing owners. Which sounds reasonable until you realize what that actually means. Artificially restricting supply to keep prices high. It's a feature, not a bug. Homeowners in wealthy areas don't want affordable housing nearby because it might lower their property values, so they lobby for restrictive zoning. And politicians, who are often homeowners themselves or funded by real estate interests, give it to them. This is where the class divide gets baked into the geography. But it gets worse. After the 2008 financial crisis, when millions of families lost their homes, Wall Street saw an opportunity. Private equity firms like Blackstone moved in and bought up thousands of foreclosed properties at bargain prices. They didn't buy them to sell. They bought them to rent, permanently. And not just single-family homes, entire apartment complexes, whole neighborhoods. Housing became an asset class for institutional investors. You know what that means? It means your rent isn't set by what you can afford. It's set by what maximizes returns for shareholders. It means algorithms determine your lease terms. It means when Blackstone buys a building, they raise rents, cut maintenance, and push out long-term tenants to flip units into luxury apartments or short-term vacation rentals. This is financialization. Housing isn't about people anymore. It's about portfolios. And cities played along. New York has a program called 421A, a tax break for developers who build affordable housing. Sounds great, right? Except the definition of affordable is so distorted that units going for $3,000 a month qualify. Meanwhile, the developers save millions in taxes and build luxury towers that working people can't afford. It's a subsidy for the rich, paid for by everyone else. This isn't unique to New York. Cities across the country offer tax incentives, zoning variances, and public land giveaways to developers in exchange for a handful of affordable units that aren't actually affordable. The developers make out like bandits, politicians get campaign contributions, and regular people get priced out. Let's talk numbers. In 1960, the median rent in the U.S. was about 20% of median income. Today, it's closer to 30%, and in major cities, it's often 40% or higher. The federal government defines rent-burdened as spending more than 30% of your income on housing. By that measure, nearly half of all renters in America are rent-burdened. Millions are spending 50% or more. That's not a housing shortage. That's wealth extraction. And homelessness? It's exploded. Not because there aren't enough homes. There are more empty housing units in this country than there are homeless people. But those units are investments. They sit vacant, appreciating in value, while people sleep in tents. This is a system working exactly as designed. Housing has been turned into a machine that transfers wealth from renters to landlords, from workers to investors, from the bottom to the top. So when Zohran Mamdani stands up and calls it corruption, he's not exaggerating. He's pointing at a 40-year policy regime that prioritized profit over people. But here's the thing. This system doesn't run itself. It requires politicians to keep it going. It requires campaign donations, backroom deals, and a whole lot of people looking the other way. And that's exactly what Mamdani exposed next. If you want to understand why housing policy never seems to work for ordinary people, you need to follow the money. And when you do, you'll find the same names showing up over and over again on donor lists, on zoning boards, in the offices of elected officials who somehow always vote the way real estate wants them to. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's public record. The real estate industry is one of the largest sources of campaign cash in American politics. In New York alone, the Real Estate Board of New York, REBNY, funnels millions of dollars into city and state races every single cycle. They don't do this out of civic duty. They do it because it works. A council member who takes 50 grand from developers is a lot less likely to vote against a luxury tower going up in a neighborhood that doesn't want it. And it's not just campaign contributions. It's the revolving door. Here's how it works. A politician spends a few years in office, votes the right way on zoning changes and tax breaks, and then, conveniently, lands a six-figure consulting gig with a real estate firm after leaving office. Or they become a lobbyist. Same industry, same clients, just a different title and a much bigger paycheck. You see this pattern everywhere. City council members who championed developer-friendly policies suddenly become senior advisors at lobbying firms that represent those same developers. Mayors who fast-tracked luxury projects end up on corporate boards. It's not illegal, but it sure as hell isn't public
service. And then there are the zoning boards, the unelected bodies that decide what gets built and where. These boards are supposed to represent community interests. But look at who sits on them. Former real estate executives, architects who work for development firms, landlords, people with direct financial stakes in approving projects. When a community shows up to oppose a high-rise that'll block sunlight and drive up rents, they're not talking to neutral arbitrators. They're talking to people who profit from saying yes. Let's talk about the affordable housing scam, because this is where the corruption gets dressed up as charity. Developers come to the city with a proposal. We'll build this luxury tower, and in exchange for tax breaks and zoning variances, we'll include some affordable units. The city agrees. The politician cuts a ribbon. Everyone pretends they solved the housing crisis. Except the affordable units are maybe 10% of the total building, and the income requirements are set so high that a household making $70,000 or $80,000 a year qualifies. That might sound affordable if you're a real estate lawyer, but if you're a teacher or a nurse or someone working 2 jobs, you're still priced out. Meanwhile, the developer saves millions in property taxes. They get to build taller, denser, more profitable buildings than zoning laws would normally allow. And the city loses revenue that could have gone to actual public housing. It's a wealth transfer disguised as a public benefit. And the media? Mostly silent. Because guess who advertises heavily in local newspapers and on local news stations? Real estate companies, luxury developments, brokerage firms. The same industry shaping policy is also shaping the narrative. But every now and then, someone like Mamdani comes along and says the quiet part out loud. He exposes the pipeline. He names the names. He connects the dots between who donates, who votes, and who profits. And the second he does, the machine kicks into gear. Because when you threaten a multi-billion-dollar ecosystem that depends on political protection, they don't just ignore you. They come after you. They question your motives. They attack your credibility. They flood the zone with op-eds and press releases designed to make you look extreme, unrealistic, or dangerous. And that's exactly what happened next.
The real estate crisis is a trust crisis. It's proof that the people in power care more about protecting wealth than protecting people. And once that realization sets in, it doesn't go away. Now here's the political part. Populism is rising on both the left and the right. And the one thing both sides increasingly agree on is that the system is corrupt. They might disagree on the solutions, but they agree on the problem. The elites are insulated. The middle class is getting crushed. The rules don't apply equally. Housing could be the issue that breaks through, because it's not abstract, it's not theoretical. Everyone needs a place to live. Everyone knows someone who's been priced out, evicted, or stuck in a cycle they can't escape. It's personal, it's visceral, and it cuts across partisan lines. Mamdani's speech wasn't just about housing. It was a test of whether it's possible to challenge entrenched power and survive. A test of whether telling the truth about corruption still matters. A test of whether elected officials can serve the public instead of their donors. And if he succeeds, if he shifts the conversation, if he inspires other politicians to stop playing nice with the real estate lobby, if he proves you can win without their money, it opens the door for something bigger. Because housing is the tip of the spear. If people start demanding accountability here, they'll start demanding it everywhere. And that's what the establishment fears most. Not one councilman, not one speech, but the idea that people might finally realize who's pulling the strings and decide they've had enough. This isn't about policy anymore. It's about power, and whether we're willing to take it back.